So we'll begin looking at the three types of suffering, then after we may have some question and answer. So the meditation on the three types of suffering, the suffering of change, go down, 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 there you go, the suffering of change. Pleasant feelings experienced by beings in cyclic existence are like the pleasure felt when cool water is applied to an inflamed boil or a carbuncle. As the temporary feeling fades, the pain reasserts itself. This is called the suffering of change and includes not only the feeling itself, but also the main mind and other mental processes that are similar to it, as well as the contaminated objects which, when perceived, give rise to that feeling. Boil, yeah. Inflamed boil.
The inflamed boil said it
the boils then are in the pimple and the sour the hot and inflames and hot.
The study 자전거 표미 뒤다보기 대화나보디 딱 얘는 대화면 표미 코랑도 상마당이나 딱 나자디지 레고가야 람상코기 genji 마트에 봐도 주 차보지도 주 강무지 마트에 봐도 그 내랑데 간디지 와래서나 길대는 소리 지어와
길
다다 길 비어와 지난 디디디 품이 코랑데 내당데 간디지래 아주 품이 기간에 내당데 간디지래 선도 다시 말하는 코에 내당 간디지래 선도니 찍었을 거예요.
So this inflamed boil, so when we, the inflamed boil, like a pimple that's feeling really hot.
Yes. A huge pimple.
Huge, yeah, boil. Yeah, it's really uncomfortable. So anyway, when you have this inflamed boil, like looking at it when it's not in touch with either cold water or coolness or heat, hot water, so it's not affected by either of those things, then it's kind of just all right as it just left as it is. It feels okay, right? Just all right. So like that, then we have to apply that metaphor or analogy to cyclic existence as well, samsara, and seeing how in its normal state it kind of feels all right. We have to kind of match up the analogy and the meaning.
다들 표미 감 대시도 사왔다가 주시왔다 보는 데 대화 나와네 코아게 남주만주 초와 대화도 세 되지 되는 남 시관나스 시관 동네 개벌이 그 동네로 쓰려다 초와 대화디마 양원주 접에 주시와디 매버 차원주 접에 랑신이 고 동네 중도 접에 아주 초와 동네 중도 와 근데 초와 동네들은 아주 동네세 계제 디셔서라고 그래서 네가 초코랑 계제지고 마시지 대단 총벌이 몇신 신경 신남당스다. 때도 탐지 아니 강을 미미기 위해 사제는 교배동이 일러 참말로 교배동에서 봐라.
So then you have that boil, and then as it says, like when the cool water is applied to that inflamed boil, then there's a temporary pleasant feeling that arises, right? It's soothing when you get the coolness, the cool water on the boil. It feels like it feels good for that moment. That's like the analogy for the suffering of change, the pleasant feeling that we have in cyclic existence, which is the suffering of change. And then when the coolness fades off, so here it says when the temporary feeling fades, So when the coolness wears off, then the absence of that, then there's the suffering feeling again, right? There's the painful feeling of the boil again. So likewise, when the pleasant feeling of suffering of change wears off, then we have the suffering of suffering. And not only that, not only with regard to our feelings, but as it says here, also the main mind and the other mental processes or the mental states that are similar to it, as well as the contaminated objects, which when perceived give rise to that feeling.
지선 틀린가 친구 있어. 가전스는 남샤주도 말하는 쪽 초와 동행지 게 원도전데 초와 동행들의 미치 동행도 세마도지 디 냠수뇽베 나바시아바다 디 냠수뇽베다 지비 아주 셰베기 차 탐제 아니 어디 동행지 정신 파 그것 누구여에 something on the TV or what.
So actually this is an important point because we recognize when we have an unpleasant feeling, when we have a suffering feeling, but we don't really recognize that not only that suffering feeling, but the mind that has that feeling with it, and ourselves and the whole package, like we ourselves as well, suffering, and we fail to recognize that.
But in case sometimes if it is a huge suffering, then automatically even listening to the music, even what you are normally enjoying, you really don't have a mood for that, and sometimes it annoys you. So that time you are through a little bit of anger, you are projecting, bring more anger. At that time it's not real, you are understanding the pervasive, the suffering, the package, the whole package. But now if you calm your mind down and when you are really having any kind of suffer, then whole thing that actually 풍봉합을 아니고 맞으면서 수고 공부를 초야 공부도 쉬고 남바시가 공부 영어조조 베기 아니 되게 동네들이 봐 믹스돼 미고도 전에 아니 충된 남아가 총스 총스라고 신시제 아니 동네 미버 되게 동네들이 한 초야 양소량도 정말로 이 냠도요 소로지 마도 직지고 초아지고 그냥 샤바상으로 나가될 수도 있겠는데.
So actually when we have this suffering feeling, it's not only that all of the five aggregates, the form aggregate or the body, the feeling aggregate, the discrimination aggregate, the primary consciousness aggregate, all of the aggregates, they all kind of hone in on the same object that brings the suffering. So it's not only the suffering feeling, but all of the other five aggregates along with that. So all of the other aggregates, so all five, they kind of all end up having the concomitant. They're similar. It's so that they're concomitant by way of five ways. So they all share the same object and so forth.
this 다 되는 초와 동이 셔버차 대해서 남게 봤다면 루슨 동아치 비치 동에대 케미도 수세시는 어서 빼디 케미 수세 기기 이게와 대양 초와 지구는 망하다 시로 초와 동에대 지키고도 아니 말하는 것이 탐지파 동에대 동치를 따고 그래서 제바테니가 딱지기 초와 대화제에는 동에니가 강양 마치기 뒤기 대 차왔다 보니 사고도 제가 좋아 땅용데 내년에 제수 되게 두지 되네로 내년에 수준인데 되게 좋아 동네다 좋아 대원 이거 전체기 아니 두지 두면서 삼고 그래서 좋아 땅용니까 봐.
근데 타마디는 내벌년
다다디 제도 다다 내년에 제수 되게 수준인데 내년에 세디 나네시 시베게 사제가 좋아 대화다 동네 이거기 춘 전체기 아니 두지기 동에서 초당용 지게가.
So reading through the suffering of pain, when a painfully inflamed boil makes contact with an irritant such as salt water, it is agonizing or painful. This is how you recognize the feeling of pain. Painful feelings like this constitute the suffering of pain, or the suffering of suffering, we sometimes call it. Because as soon as they arise, the body and the mind are tormented, as in the case of kidney pain. Also, as explained above, the suffering of pain is not just the feeling. And on the suffering of conditionality, contaminated neutral feelings are like an inflamed boil, which is in contact with neither soothing nor irritating substances. Because these feelings coexist with dysfunctional tendencies, they constitute the suffering of conditionality, which, as explained above, does not refer to the feelings alone. Insofar as the suffering of conditionality is affected by previous karma, as well as the afflictions, and coexists with the seeds that will produce the future suffering and affliction, it coexists with persistent dysfunctional tendencies. And so what we're looking at here is the underlying things that brings forth the suffering of suffering, or the suffering of pain and the suffering of change. So the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change come from this underlying suffering of having these dysfunctional tendencies. And so this is the suffering of conditionality, this which is neutral. And so this neutral suffering of the suffering of conditionality, of having these dysfunctional tendencies, that brings forth from that the suffering of pain and the suffering of change ensue.
다 대양 초월 지구를 미쳐본가도 시도 시도자베 다고 심중이 유자베 디 코드 중에야 아다 고념도 예배 심중 망보 연구리 아니 조선도 심중 시도자베 생기 코리아 아니 완전히 꾸루마서 보진 지난 되시던 뒤로가 저와 뒤에서 봐야 제가 잡았어요. 또 참말로 생기 코를 참아년 분도 끼고 그랬어. 그래서 군도서도 따고 그냥 로고 요르가 그래서 디기 차게 좀 알아주고 선나버려 옆에나 좋아도 해시게 보는데 안에 디냠도 고조마도 스키기 요하다 안에 조선디게 밑들이야 딱이 치료선로지도 선보고 요리스.
So again, we're not just talking about the feeling of suffering. So when we have the feeling of suffering, that goes together, it's concomitant with a main mind and some other mental factors or states of mind that go together with that feeling. So whenever there's a mind, there's necessarily together with it or concomitant with it 5 omnipresent mental factors or omnipresent states of mind. So this omnipresent means that they're together with every mind that exists. So you have these 5 omnipresent mental factors are feeling, discrimination, contact, intention and attention. Those 5 go together with every mind. So what we're looking at here is whenever there's this feeling of suffering, it's not just this feeling alone that is suffering. Together with it, the other 4 of those 5 omnipresent mental states or mental factors and the main mind that are together with it, they're all influenced and affected by and experience this feeling of suffering.
Oda dice tene dini se leda nyomobe tanenge nengi dice sono dini leda nyomobe ame shamando gyuji 동해다 영어만 치만 넘기에 사변이 제수 되거나 꾸두되거나 냉내가 되고 냉내에 인당데 가져야지나 동해 치마 그 동해다 아니 초와 동해다 아니 그 동해 니가 야 제발치긴 얘들이 가르치면서나 디기 사변 유여받아 사변다 되는 유여되고 인자 아니 되려야 꾸두 그네 내가 되고 오시죠 도스지 정도
So I'm just trying to find the section in the English. Did you find it? Insofar, thank you. What's above that? Feeling goes this suspension. I'll read it from there. Insofar as the suffering of conditionality is affected by previous karma, as well as the afflictions, and coexists with the seeds that will produce future suffering and afflictions, it coexists with persistent dysfunctional tendencies. Oh, I already read that too, yeah, I think. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so it's again looking at this point that the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, these feelings, the pleasant and unpleasant feeling, or the suffering of pain and the suffering of change, these come from this underlying suffering of this having these dysfunctional tendencies. And how is that? Because we have these dysfunctional tendencies of the suffering of conditionality, then there's always the seeds for those feelings to arise, the seeds for the suffering to arise.
So it's good because if you are ready to answer so many questions that normally when you are suffering you cannot answer. So now when you are suffering, then as you see, when you have a quite physical suffering, then if you could say, I have this kind of body, then normally the causes and conditions not driving to suffer, so I feel staying in a kind of a neutral.
Neutral.
Not neutral. So, and then every time you are having the awareness, if the right causes and condition has to meet to suffer, then I will suffer. So as great Bodha in this morning, there was a statement there saying, what is so surprising, somebody dies because he has this body. And if somebody gets sick because he has this kind of condition and body. So what is so surprising about that? So this is such a brave statement that in this world people normally don't use this. So as Dhamma practitioner, sometimes we forget that. It is very important. It is such a great thesis that to hold very strongly. So similarly, when you are not having, when you have pain, when you are pleasant or suffering, you would see this. There's a huge shift. But then at the moment when you are in a neutral state, not really good. Repeat that.
Neutral.
Did I say that right? Neutral?
Yeah, that's better.
Mine is Canadian accent. Yeah. So then now it's better in the middle. At that time we have to remember how at this moment even looks like quite stable, but it's a matter of time. So it's more like you are ready for it, well prepared. And so to bring this, to say, to be staying as a being ready, then you need some kind of logic and reason to prove that. Because it's not like Buddha says it and Lama Tsongkhapa says it, we accept it. But the reason is there already, saying, and then let a nyumong amme shimando jushings. And Dunyada Nyomo Chimanam Kibi, Saving Jesun Devina, don't go to the Ningen in the Demo Sejita, or the statement to deliver.
So again, insofar as the suffering of conditionality is affected by previous karma, as well as the afflictions, and coexists with the seeds that will produce future suffering and affliction, it coexists with persistent dysfunctional tendencies. 이 보다와기 궁양겨
어디 말이야? 대어들을 초와 대화 기업은 잡아게. 근데 자방 그 기우도 싫을 초와 대화 기업은 잡아게. 동의 기업은 공로 배워. 니도 가야면 내년에는 또 우리 루텔이야 아니면 저 그데스 사모당 대유선 미다가 따라서 준비 아니 디무기요 지우스 아디 아주 내당 같아.
So thus, continuing on, thus attachment increases when a pleasant feeling arises, and hostility or anger increases when pain arises, and ignorance increases when you misapprehend the body, which is part of a dysfunctional situation that is neither pleasant nor painful, as permanent, when it is in fact impermanent. So we have this wrong holding of what is impermanent to be permanent. So these things arise from the feelings we have.
또 단다 동의 체디기 배나 체디기 디두 탐제 아니 말하는 저기 땅 좋아 땅용디 갈래들 까베야 아니 되게 내게 세서로 전화 신시지 아니 땅용디 레지 갈려를 까라 아주 상모당당 그리스도교로서는 아니 단다되는 신 그자 어디 루이텔 미니 아니 루이텔 미니 아니 미다발다와 아니 동네와다 대화 당주단다 땅 장대 다다시세 신체지 뭐这个气주로 로방고직 상의 땅지 아니 아주 동이기 특별히 디디도딘 선없지
나 딩
디디 투수의 강라 디디스 디디 상모 땅 대디스 요레스
So here again, when we have the neutral feeling that's neither pleasant or painful feeling, at the time we have the neutral feeling, that's when we can investigate. Like normally we have the clinging to what is impermanent to be permanent, what is in the nature of being unclean or impure to be pure or clean, what doesn't have a self to have a self, what is and what is empty to not be empty. We have these wrong clingings, and at the time of when we have the neutral feeling, that's the time we can investigate those. It's my mistake. So actually, it's not that we investigated that. That's the time when our ignorance about those things, or that wrongly grasp at those things, creeps in.
So when you have quite a free time, when you are not really occupied by so much grasping towards the pleasant feeling and the unpleasant feeling, suffering, and then at that time, what is your job? What do you do for on a free time? So then it sounds like I'm fitting my ignorance. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's trying to describe. Tell us, Dushakini, Shimon Roa, Tadi, Dushaki, Chile Karchitusna, Dushakini, Shimon Roa, Markeva, so that Dumi gave a chitus. Roa gave Dumi gave a chitus. Shadangini, Diri, Yangera Sobi, Chimara, Yandro Dumi gave a chitus. Timogeni, Tini gave Dumi Midoma. Dune 다도 캐디 소리지. 미친도지 부디 캐디 소리지나. 아니 대려만 또 생기는 소리잖아. 아니 디모를 하겠어.
So attachment, what does attachment do? Attachment gives rise to suffering, such as future rebirth in the 5 realms. The realms of the hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, and deities. And hostility or anger, what does that do? It brings about suffering such as sorrow in this life, as well as the future suffering of miserable realms. While ignorance acts in such a way as to maintain in existence the sufferings produced by the other two, attachment and hostility. And so it's like a really big, strong person carrying two children around, two kids around. So it's like what the ignorance does is it carries and holds up the other two, the attachment and the anger.
지자가 그 도샤리야 텐도 양가 중이 다 와들 그래 텐도 양가 중이 나로네 아니 펜지기래 세대 펜버지기 쇠대버지기 망부지어봐 지자가 도샤리가 같은스나 도샤리가 축치슈 텐도 양가 중에는 도샤리가 축치슈 지자가 콜 레디 마손에 코치 마손에 네고 야 벨링인데 도착이 요바. 어제장 도착이 이미 기어치마게 내 가리지 사이는 뒤야. 뭐 같이 죽는 인자 도착이 치마 로마를 깨버렸어 베기. 눈이
So attachment, when we look at the presentation of the 12 links of dependent arising for cyclic existence, is going to come later. So among those 12 links, like the really powerful one is attachment. And so among the presentation of the 12 links, you have the projecting links and the links that are projected and the links that kind of ripen, the ripening links. And so here attachment is this really powerful one, which is the ripening link, which the previous karma to be reborn in another state is ripened by the attachment, so that it manifests that karma, so that it projects that next life. And so that's why here it's explained that attachment gives rise to suffering, such as the future rebirth in the 5 rounds.
제가 shedangi 딱 저기 레 두제 펜버체가 동이 슈게 추게 버체가 이니 기능 예발 펜버체가 인담디 저기 삼도지 당배는 단도 준주는 소문나신 아니 she당답이 디고메스 소리와 she당답이 디고메스 she당답이 디고메스 저한테 디 저기 요모 도서 망고지 지기 타가로 잡는 요모 지디 시동스 지비어데 디 나로네 저기다 알 갈고 오면도 슬라베나 참말로 랍토야다데 미술이나 콘도도 고군디세 디스플라토르와 디슈지기 답에 슈충부지 되자베 라신니가 네 매바 쇠야다 통과체 유조데 디인도자베 디두 콘도를 제어원도 자베 콜레야 더 concentration 소리 네버더디 아니 타지도 비기네베 지카소레다 르당야 지당 매바 쇠야 지당 또 비싼 거 이거 슈슈 드리기 이거 봐. 어디기다 차네 지다 개와 주머니와 봐도 계슬라가 람삼 이체하고 요런데 이내에 말하는 수준 전부는 뒷나로 상담하고는 지 니니도 수루지네 데마에 뭐도에디 콘도티 치료가 받다. 릴레이션 토링에디 콘도 치료가 되가 되다. 저마시 두고.
So when we think of anger, here it says hostility, anger, then when anger is like it's like the word is benefit into memory, like it assists or helps, it helps, it's like a negative condition for negative things to happen, like it's a condition to bring about negative experiences or unpleasant experiences and things. So this is one thing of anger, and as it is said in the in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, there is no greater or no worse negativity than anger. Yeah, and so it's hard for us to see that anger could project us to the lower realms, but actually it's hard for us to accept that right now. But if we just think about how it affects us, like it disturbs our peace of mind and it creates all these problems for us, and it's the biggest problem or destroyer of our relationships and things. So anger, in any way that you look at it, it's not good for us. We can all accept that. Like if we said, among all the 84,000 afflictions that are explained in the Buddhist tradition, You know, if you could pick out like the big problematic one that everyone could all agree on is to be in affliction, we would all say hands down, yeah, anger. And if there's the one thing we all don't want to have that we know is not good for us, all hands down we can say, yeah, it's anger.
Have you ever met someone say, today I'm very happy, I'm in the mood of anger? Nobody. But ultimately, when people were so excited, then there's attachment, but they will never say, I'm full of attachment today. But somehow the excitement shows there's something huge, a kind of expectations or some kind of so much thinking that you can see from that. But when I did a little of my own research, so I always think in the one of the time, if you really wanted to see how much you are attached to yourself, and then the anchor is the time. So that's why I always hold to this thesis when I debate with my classmates in Dharamsala. So I always hold to this thesis saying anchor is an attachment. So then some of my the classmates, they really like, are you stupid or something? They debate with me, but I hold to this thesis very strongly. Then one day, one of my teacher was giving the class, and then he suddenly said, if you see the attachment in a gentle, then the clinking in a very gentle way, it is attachment. But once you really wanted to see how you are so attached to yourself, at the anchor time, you will recognize that very strongly. And then he supported my thesis. So one of my classmates looked and turned to me saying, I give you a point. That's really true, because the how we use at the time of anger, normally how humble, simple that person is, at the time of the anger, then he would be the loudest, and then he would say like I and me very strongly. That's for sure. So it brings down like emotion. How dare you say this? So there's so much that I really bursts out from you. So it's pure sign that you have a strong holding to yourself at that time. One of my friends, a very kind Lama, he has a student, and then he gives always a teaching, and then that the person respects that Lama as like the real Buddha. So then normally he scolds, whatever, he really has a full patience. So one time he was driving and they were going on a trip, and then he got into a fight, an accident happened, and with the Indian guy. Then they start fighting. Then the Lama thought, I am the one to control my attendant or my student now. And then he goes to his student and puts his hand on the attendant and say, cool down. But then he said, this is not a teaching time. This is not teaching time. You better sit on the front seat. I know how to deal with this. So that time, no Buddha, no teacher. So this is the very peak moment we can see how much you have a very grasping towards yourself. How did it Shetan Gini is a diri yang so the children to have the Medon Chetana, so develop to me to tell the chaka. So Dumila Pungu the Dumi, the Chopa Yibet, Sumuta, some Sheranka, the Niana Tambudi, and no Sabrajo. The not so develop Dumi to the chaka, the Kadisha.
So therefore, attachment ceases when you see pleasant feelings as suffering. Yeah, attachment ceases
when you see
pleasant feelings
as suffering.
Oh.
So how does that sound? I am not going to buy this line. What does that really mean? Yeah, somebody now wanted to answer that for me. Anybody? Anila? This is really confusing line. Venerable, give me some support. Don't leave me alone. Anybody?
If you see something that you would normally see as pleasant, but you see that's actually the suffering, all conditioned suffering, the suffering of change. Once you recognize that, is it saying that then your attachment will cease?
Okay. So you are saying when at the time of that, pleasant, when you come to the pleasant feeling, and you are seeing as the nature of suffering. That's what I'm thinking. Otherwise, it does not make any sense. It really complicates life. So, as we say, it's a nature of the suffering. It's very hard to say when you are if you have in a pleasant moment, if you won a lottery, $1 million lottery, and then you will never feel like I'm in the present moment of what we call it, dumigirun chinjingi, and dumigirun chinjingi nalanga dewayu something malo.
Yeah, we can't think that I'm experiencing happiness that is in the nature of suffering, can we? We can't think that.
It takes some huge encouragement even to say it. So it's more like a billionaire thinking, I have built my empire on the nature of suffering. So it's difficult to feel like that way. So it takes some kind of investigation, how much you have understanding of the law of causality, and how much you have trust in the karma, how much you have trust in this. All this comes out. It takes the kind of this meditation. So that's why I always emphasize my friends and students, if we forget this way of building the foundation, and then how much you try to search for Dharma, and sometimes the pleasant feeling comes, then we will always forget it. Because we feel like I love pleasant feeling. What's wrong with that? I'm not saying the pleasant feeling is the wrong way, but we need to feel like where you are feeling it is in this kind of a spell, the spell of this samsara. So this is why we need to make this connection. Sometimes this is good to put that way, so then you give a thought, right? Sometimes one excellent the translators try to act so smart, they change it. They will try to explain it. So this is how it is written in there. They put it like this. This is very good. Okay. Then so 미유 가르감 되차가야 돼. 다 디서당소.
네.
되차가 언제든지 되차기 기스기 시딜 미니 초와 대화지 뚱구요래데 이나야 삼로 당당지기 초와 대화 용당데 동의기 이런 친지라 대화를 되니 안만 주기 대화를 디디기 대화 대라 더기를 찾아 동의기랑 신기진라 동의기랑 신진기 대화 동의기랑 신진기 대화달라 아니 대화는 더 그렇지 대규여자 될 때는 아니 초와 대화 시험도 전에 더 대샤기 오도 전에 더 차들로
So the attachment ceases when you see pleasant feeling and suffering. So looking into that, we the object that we get attached to, this pleasant feeling is actually a feeling that's in the nature of suffering, but we perceive it as pleasant, and therefore we cling on to that. And so that's how we can see that attachment is a mistaken mind or a wrong state of mind, because it's clinging to what is actually in the nature of suffering to be pleasant.
So we shouldn't forget about the first where Lama Tsongkhapa put this example of the kasadi madi.
Inflamed boil. Inflamed boil.
Boiled in the situation where this pimple is in a state of normal. And now, when you have this pleasant feeling, you might feel like, oh, this pleasant is so good. But there will be your friend watching like, I don't call this is a very pleasant feeling, because yet you feel like pleasant, but it's better to not have it. So sometimes in the text it says, in samsara, what is the pleasant feeling is something like itching.
Yes.
Itching.
Scratching and
Scratching,
itch. Scratching and itch.
When you have itch, when you have
scratch.
itch, then you scratch, and there's a pleasant feeling. And then Shantideva says, here in the samsara, they say it's a pleasant, but I'm saying like the best way is not to have the itch. So, because that pleasant is in the nature of the suffering. Because we are locked into something, the shaki, the shaki, miba and lo tumi tunji, ko miba naru yudu chambe, dila kasugi dewa tawandu chambe, and dewa de chinjilo yogachi.
So since the object, the attachment is observant, is mistaken, it's holding what is suffering to be pleasant, since that is a mistaken way of holding the object, then the attachment itself is mistaken, and Tamadi, the magician.
Dumi ko chowa dewa de ke ondo de chowa de dewa de chawa ji ko chawa ji se shi korang ki mo se wo korang ki sambo de nor de binza del tem de ane dewa de che di dumi gi no shinchin ki dewa de che des.
So yeah, again like that. So because the attachment, the object is observant, it's mistaken with the way it's observing its object. It's observing what is unpleasant to be pleasant. Then it's because it's mistaken with regard to its object, or the object of it is mistaken, then attachment itself becomes a wrong state of mind. And so the pleasant feeling that it experiences, that attachment experience, that comes from that attachment, is not actually a genuine, authentic, pleasant experience. It's actually in the nature of suffering.
다디 제트는 디슈고리아 초도미 라풍고디도 동행기 주 초고인데 텔라 소모타고를 삼바다 시단가 초와 당뇨만은 미다바다 세진 고베랑 진진도 때보다 띵무 가데 초와 숨 두숨이 교를 미당하고 저 초와 디숨디 두숨이 교를 로당디 아니 니에르셔지 디 고야디 아니 탑디 고안의 띵비어르스니 애니 년주주사 베젠디 파워 토미 유송이비요 파워 토미기 송체교기 디나볼로 여반나 신치제 데리아 그셔유시 송도다.
So, in the case of painful feelings, hostility or anger ceases when you consider that since these aggregates of body and mind are a collection of causes of suffering, painful feelings arise from them, just as physical affliction does. In the case of neutral feelings, ignorance ceases when you see that they are impermanent, exhaustible, and perishable in nature. In this way, you prevent the three feelings from giving rise to the three mental poisons. So this is explaining how the three feelings can give rise to the three poisons, the three poisonous attitudes: attachment, anger, and ignorance. But here, looking at how to prevent those three feelings from giving rise to the three mental poisons. And then Lama Tsongkhapa says, I have explained these points in accordance with the compendium of determinations and the level of yogic deeds by Arya Asanga. So just in accord with how it's explained there, Lama Tsongkhapa has explained it here.
답배지 켈지 아니 쿠르치 무켜와니 쿠디 지금 쿠르고바 대sam도 대화 매바 신도 예와레비 풍부 쿠냐 지시 숨고바 대세도 동네도 좋았대 풍부딜라 동네당 아니 용몽기 내년엔도 차고 유비 뒤지도 동네도 요나 초와 동네 다다 매베 값수 제 중요한 dem 가서 대마다 양 고마초주군이 동네 그마게베나 뒤지기 동네니 동네 탐지다 차바 동네 신이 싸워야 되는데 딜라 교망도 공모스 하다디 변동치부게.
So this next section is very powerful. So we have an example here. In the same way that someone bearing a heavy burden cannot be happy so long as the burden must be borne, you too will suffer so long as you carry the burden of the appropriated aggregates. Though you have occasional moments when painful feeling is absent, because the aggregates are firmly embedded in the dysfunctional tendencies of suffering and the afflictions, the suffering of conditionality is still present, and therefore myriad sufferings are just on the verge of arising in countless ways. Therefore, since the suffering of conditionality pervades all suffering and is the root of the other two types of suffering, meditate on it often in order to become disenchanted with it.
Too much meditating on suffering now, so why this is focusing so much on in the first scope, second scope, I will talk so much on suffering, because as we say, if you really don't know how much you are tormented by thirst, or it came tormented by thirst, and then how much you say, I appreciate the water as a nectar, it's a lie. So now, more you have this you need Dharma in a day-to-day life, more you have a better understanding of suffering, then you will know what kind of a remedy, what kind of a guidance you need in your life. According to that, that person knows how to pick up his best friend, which is called the teacher, guru. So many people, even in some of my friends, they really don't know how to choose their Lama. So they will come to me and say, I wanted to practice Dharma. What do you think of that Lama? That Lama. It is very hard to say like he's good, he's not good. It's not my type of way of answering. So I say, if you really wanted to take him as your teacher, what are the qualities do you see? And most people say, when I sit next to him, I feel very peaceful. So okay, I cannot answer anything. It's very hard. So some students will come up with some kind of investigation saying that Lama, even he does not teach in a tantric and some very inspiring things, but his practice, the genuine practice, that he always reminds the students how to tackle with this suffering time to time, and then especially this connecting to the root of all the suffering. So then I say, no doubt, even that a Lama can be demon taking, because this teaching is very rare. So go for it. And even Buddha said, all his teaching is, this medicine is only to apply to liberate from the suffering, or not to just to enjoy for excitement moments. So this is very necessary when the Lama Tsongkhapa always reminds it, meditate on it often in order to become, how do you say,
disenchanted.
Disenchanted, correct.
Disenchanted.
Disenchanted.
Lare.
You got it.
Kyo.
Kyoa.
Kyoa. Dila kyoa. Mangdu gom o.
For you, unless you don't have it until you experience that. Okay. Dice, tatine in the example saying taking the burden, you know, yeah, to carry the burden. So 제자가 말하는 적이 아니 근데 앞시오죠. 쿠디 지점 쿠고가 대전도 대화에 오신 것이 되는데 초와 동의에 되는 수지요 말에 아니 선보 시차고스다는 유비들이 되는 수지요 말에 이나야 초와 동의당 유비들이 니 개벌 책임이 시디 레당통인데 가고 싶다. 또 다디 말하는 남주주의나 아니 저와 딘디니디 미디어기 인주디 관련된 종성을 다디 말하는 인베스티게이션 타시버지 제원도 잡에 딱 공부들이 되는 종원도 잡에 공부들이 아주 고치셔야 되셨어. 고치셔야 돼. 어디지 라다냐.
So again, looking at this analogy of, in the same way that someone bearing a heavy burden cannot be happy so long as the burden must be borne, you too will suffer so long as you carry the burden of the appropriated aggregates. And so all the suffering, the suffering of suffering and suffering of change that we experience, the underlying base of those from where they stem is these aggregates. And it's hard for us to just get rid of that underlying base for the other types of suffering, isn't it? And so we need to recognize that it's that we have this basis of these appropriated aggregates, and so therefore the other two sufferings have to come. So we have to, there's no rest at the beginning, so there's no rest from the suffering of suffering, and there's no rest, no respite from the suffering of change, are there? And that's because they have this underlying basis of the appropriated aggregates. So it's hard for us to just get rid of those, or to get rid of those appropriated aggregates. So we need to recognize and investigate that is the underlying basis of the other sufferings. And so these appropriated aggregates are the heaviest or greatest, the biggest burden. When it's given the analogy of the burden, these appropriated aggregates are the biggest burden that we have. So it's, the same way as someone bearing a heavy burden cannot be happy so long as the burden must be borne, you too will suffer so long as you carry the burden of the appropriated aggregates. So it just says you will suffer so long as you carry the burden here.
It does not have.
It doesn't have exact.
The language it carries something else.
Yeah.
But in English, it cannot bring this fully understanding of that.
So long as you have the burden of the aggregates, for that long, suffering will arise, or there will be suffering. So long as you have the burden of these aggregates, they will always be the cause for giving rise to suffering. So because the aggregates are firmly embedded in the dysfunctional tendencies of suffering and the afflictions, the suffering of conditionality is still present, and therefore the myriad sufferings are just on the verge of arising in countless ways. So again, it's saying so long as there is this suffering of conditionality, therefore since the suffering of conditionality pervades all suffering and is the root of the other two types of suffering, meditate on it often in order to become disenchanted with it. So recognizing that this suffering of conditionality, of having the aggregates, is the basis. So long as you have them, then all the other sufferings it will bring forth all the other sufferings. So recognizing that this suffering of conditionality is the underlying suffering which gives rise to the others. So again, therefore, since the suffering of conditionality pervades all suffering and is the root of the other two types of suffering, meditate on it often in order to become disenchanted with it.
Now, there are few more the logics and reasons. So if we go through that, then we will not finish. And then also we will not have a question and answer session. So now we will stop here today, and there's a question laying on my table. I think realizing emptiness, what is that? Emptiness makes life pointless. That's good. Because then everything is empty. No parents, no friends. Nothing is left. Oh, very good. For some time, she could emphasize that. Again, on emptiness is not a nothingness, if there is a benefit. Yeah. So I always tell people, and I always tell myself, emptiness is not everybody's cup of tea. Because if you are dealing only with the suffering of the suffering, you don't need that. Actually you need, but not directly. Then a suffering of change, not directly. Once you are left with this burden now we've been talking about, then if you feel, try to, as a Chandrakirti, the great master, as he said, the yogi's way of meditating on emptiness, how it started is when you see the suffering of this life, and then they will always connect to these comes from the causes which are the karma and then the reflections that they already come to their realization. And then they will dig out more. All this is rooted because you feel there is a truly existence of the self without the dilamdindo. Yomonkyo no mara jisoro talijo loi toji tani di yu doji nejo da pai shan go jis kanju. Yomo chaso yomo kanji ji kesa ki shidela ya dado jibe tangzin ji di dus. Tangzin di lo tenju mi tenju stare chebe kala nejo bagi tenju chaso yomo kesa ki taha di ki migwe taha de tu stare chebe do tempe 아니 미국이 다 되려야 아니 말하지 말지 세도 코랑이 면에도 수요가 나신지도 나왔다시 된게 두면은 또 내가 또 통이 되잖아 신의 내려 받아야 내가 쉬우지게 영지 다 신의 얘기네 다 단다 봐줘 단다 눈에 탐지기 해서 이곧 탐지는 까도 중사를 레와도 삼지 니 신의 뒤가 양바샤 그래서
양쪽봐 So the yogi, Najoba. So the great Master Chandrakirti, in his Entering the Middle Way, has this verse, which off the top of my head I can't bring to English, but it's basically the explanation of that verse is that all of the afflictions, they arise in dependence on the object that they arise in dependence upon comes from this self-grasping, this self-grasping, grasping at a real self. So holding this self to be really existing from its own side. And so because that's the object that appears to all of the afflictions that arise, then the yogi, when they're analysing and investigating what is the object of all of the afflictions, what do they observe, and seeing that they hold to this this really existing, truly existing self, then the yogi then experiences this really great bliss or joy, happiness, knowing that, I can actually finally get rid of the base of all of those afflictions because I can cut through that wrong holding to that self, seeing that self doesn't exist.
I didn't say aha.
Sorry, that's
That's good. So she is practicing that, so she can feel that. So in the word, it's not just aha, it's ema. That's the word it comes out. So these are some kind of requirements before going into the investigation. You need to be annoyed. You need to be distressed with these two types of suffering, and then you wish to come to the final battle. You remember that line, that battle. So now then you will feel like, now this is the only hope. If I don't stay on focus of the emptiness, the true, the nature, the true reality on that, then I will be always distracted. Not only just distracted, but I have these mistaken mind. And then there's no way that to cease two of the sufferings. It's very tiring. So once I see them, then there is hope for cessation. It comes up. Now, then you really need to investigate. As we talked a bit of the emptiness yesterday, it takes so much time to understand. Even His Holiness says it took him almost 60 years to understand. So that means it doesn't mean it will take 60 times of yours. It means like he enjoyed each and every bit of 60 years. So then don't expect to understand just now, and don't make any quick decisions like it's unnecessary. Because if you have a wish to bring the battle, which you really wanted to get the liberation from the remaining two sufferings, then this way of enthusiastic to go into this kind of research is necessary. So as I told you, if you look at this beautiful half sutra, then if you look at just not from the beginning, at the end, then you just look at no ear, no tongue, no nose. What does that mean? Because one time His Holiness did this joke in the audience. He said, one mother was reciting Heart Sutra every morning, and then she would say, no nose, no ear, no. Then the child was very annoyed. And then he said, like, every day is no nose, no. Well, just say no head, that's all. So actually, the main emphasis is not to eliminate.
Not to make them not exist.
No exist. But the more is the key word you shouldn't forget in the Heart Sutra. Say inherent nature sila. We have that somewhere.
Empty inherent nature. Yeah.
This one? Yeah.
232.
Empty of inherent nature. Not just saying just empty of inherent nature. That's the problem. So do you feel, now first we need to see what is inherent nature. Then you need to first come to that point. When you look at me, especially when you are angry at me, like talking lots of it, suffering, and then you look at me, maybe some people you might get angry. But then you look at me, actually you said I'm angry at you. I, very big one. You, student. Now when you look at this you hold to something that is not me. That is shocking. But you sit down and try to listen before making so many stupid decisions. So you need to have some kind of a patience that when you, through this kind of emotion, now how you look at me, that you, when you say you, then it looks like from my own side, from my, especially the way how I speak, where my physical body is, you might say, there it is. And then you get some kind of a place to bring your all the emotions. But then when you try to look at this, you are really labeling, or you are the object of this, where you are trying to put all your emotions on that object, is mistaken mind of the object. The tanda kondo savekala, kondo sasegi, shiti, moyo nizu tunbegi, moyo nizu tunbegi, ani kansajirewe yana telishabajires, this sometimes.
So we need to think about what is the object that is the basis for giving rise to our anger. Is it a person that exists in accordance with reality, or is it a person that isn't in accord with reality, doesn't exist in accord with reality?
제가 아랑 소리야 통원 주전에 간사세야지 아니 그런 이 덕시 풍부의 나네 두수지 능이 지여가지 통원이 요래서 이게 여가 통원나 신시에 된게 간사데 아니 피기니 여가 통원데 된게 간사데 말이야 인히른리 띵마저 켈렌도 거봐 코란의 면에 여가지 두수 여가나 신시 코란의 여가지 두수라나 따띠
So when we get angry at a person, it appears as though there's a person coming from among those 5 aggregates of the person, right? And so, when we're looking at the person, we think that we find the person among those 5 aggregates and think that the person exists there among the aggregates over there outside. Okay, so it feels like the person is over there among those 5 aggregates, and then we hold to that person as, so it appears as though it's coming from the side of the aggregates, and we believe it to be true, we grasp at that to be true. So it appears that the person is inherently existent. We can accept that, right? It appears as though it's coming there from the aggregates, and we believe that, we hold that to be. And so what we need to do is we need to check, is that, to check and search, is the person there or not?
단단하랑 저기 피게 유명에 가사제 두도 실라바나 신시제 선도 여바나 신디 두추는 샤제 아니 제바지 MD 수해줘봐 MD 수해야지 가사데 매우 수해게지 말해 MD 수해야지 가르수고 거잖아 코랑기 면에 두수야도 가사생이 두수 링링디 차베나 신시제 경기 면에 모빈이즈라 코랑기 면에 뛰어가지 두 제부 두잔데 아니 유나 다시 공부하고 강론이 요구요래 다시 뭐래래래네 제가 균이 메두즈베 더 싫어하는 거 나로 내가 소도지 베이나스 아니 공부만 수 공부이나다 아니 뭐에 나로 제 강과도 제 와이드 내가 되차.
So we need to look among the aggregates to see if the person is there as it appears. And so when we search among the aggregates, looking to try and find it, and then we discover the emptiness, the person is empty, it's not that we find that there's no person, that the person doesn't exist. It's rather that the person that appears to exist, from among the aggregates, from its own side, inherently, this real person there among the aggregates, that's what we're finding to be empty, not that the person is empty. And so that's what they need to do, this analysis, like, for example, in the Heart Sutra, where it takes the form aggregate or the body as the basis for the investigation, trying to find the self. It's like from the head to the toe, looking, it's not the head, it's not the legs, it's not the feet, it's not the arms, investigating one by one the parts of the body and not being able to find the person there. So if the person did exist from the side of the aggregates, truly exists from the side of the aggregates, we should be able to find that person among the aggregates. And when we look for it from the head to the toe, among the body, we don't find it, then it's not that we don't find a person, it's that we find this emptiness of the real, independent, inherent person from the side of the aggregates.
The most confusing thing is when we say inherently that person does not exist, but you might say
exist independence.
Exist independently. Right.
This tricky because English independently and independence. So there's a danger of mixing up the person existing in reality from its own side, or the person existing through dependence or being dependent. We have a danger of mixing those two up. So it's all right and proper to say that the person exists through dependence, being dependent. That's all right to posit the person like that. But then, if on the other hand, if we're saying that the person exists really from its own side, independently, when we say that, then we have to look for an illustration of the person among the aggregates. We should be able to point at something to say that is the person. And then when we investigate and try to find it, and we can't find anything that is the person among the aggregates, then we say the person is empty. It's empty of existing from its own side among the aggregates independently. So the basis for all of our afflictions, our attachment and our aversion and all of the other afflictions, it comes from this sense of this notion of that there really is a person existing from its own side. So this holding that they exist from their own side is the basis through which all of our other afflictions arise.
Like a small puppy looking into the reflection of its own. So never thinks that it is just my reflection. But they will just look at this another dog and then really thinking that the dog is existent by its own or inherently or something. So now, as in a bigger picture like us, we hold to the situation so tightly because we feel I or him when in attachment time, ignorance, or every time we feel like there is the truly existence of that I. So this is what we need to eliminate. We need to eliminate that kind of self, that kind of phenomena, that kind of everything, because this is against the reality. It's nothing about, we should thank for Buddha to give this teaching, but it's not, if Buddha does not come, then Buddha came and then everything changed. Not like that. Whether Buddha exists or not, Buddha comes into this planet or not, the reality is that there is no such called inherent existence, which in our negative emotions, where we hold so tightly, we are grasping truths solidly, this is the reason. So through analytical meditation, then we need to find why they are four schools, because we need to bring that very smoothly. Otherwise, you might come to the point saying like I got just a question saying, then no family, no son, no children. So it sounds the person is trying to kind of accuse me. So what are you trying to say? So that kind of fear, that kind of nihilism is there. So that's why Buddha bring the school of understanding, where the subtlest, because of the Rinpoche, Tambo Kansage, Dame, and Lapa, and Tawa, and then Kansage Dame, and Chigi Dame, Namshadu, Smart Demi, and Tamang around Jugi, Dunzing, Zawa, and Ramani Yoga said the guy should touch it, touch it on the temple.
So it was the Buddha's skillful means in the way he presented the presentation, leading from looking at coarse level of selflessness of persons to a subtle level of selflessness of persons, then to look at an even subtler level of selflessness of persons and also the selflessness of phenomena, until you get to the most refined view of how things lack any existence from their own side, lack any real existence. And so this was the Buddha's skillful means in gradually presenting this in order from the coarse to the subtle level in refinement.
On until the top level school, whereas the Prasangika school, where it talks the full definition, the complete definition of emptiness, but the rest they try to explain emptiness and selflessness, they don't have the fully understanding. So now we are not going to cover everything, but most important, when you try to think the emptiness business is not needed, then you have to come to the point, you have to say like, it appears into my eyes, what I can feel and everything, does that exist by its own or not? You need to ask this question to yourself. It is what it appears to me, I can feel through existence by its own. It is a reality or not. You need to, if you think this is the reality, then emptiness is very dangerous. Then emptiness will, better not to practice emptiness. And then most important, all these negative emotions, attachment, grasping, where does that really lock into? That you need to not just blame the attachment, and then you have to go to knock on the door where it's really kind of located very solidly. Then after you need to do this finding. And then, of course, one of the most beautiful presentation of the the highest school, Prasangika school, where it talks about emptiness, it does not talk only about emptiness. Emptiness is just a part of the presentation. The most important is the dependent rising.
Yes.
Many schools, everybody says dependent. I'm dependent on that. I'm dependent on my leg. My leg is dependent on me. In order to understand me, you need to go through my this or speech or my feeling and all this. It looks like you are talking so much about dependent. But how much you talk about dependent, then you need to be very honest. Honesty, I mean like you are not telling lie here, but deep inside, you are locked into the situation that I exist by its own. You really exist by its own. If you meditate, this is how meditation on to bring some meditation to watch your how the inherently existence of I. When you try to see in a meditation mode, it's so beautiful because normally we say my consciousness can be me, my physical body can be me. This is more in a
It's like acquired through tenets or a philosophical view.
A philosophical view. But if you really try to search where is that I, then it appears without depending on all the five aggregates, then you will feel like there is that inherent I. Then it really shows you the true color, which that we really need to negate, right? Negate. So once you find it, and now who will be happy? The yogis, who are so tormented by the suffering. Then they say, now I found the antidote. That's why Buddha, when he found the realization, when he had gained this realization, before the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, what did he say is, I found this profound the teaching like the nectar, sufficient, profound,
free of elaboration. Free of elaboration.
Free of elaboration. Elaboration. Clear. Clear light. Good. Dumachi. Dumachi, how do you translate?
Uncompounded.
Huh?
Uncompounded.
Uncompounded. If I try to teach this, people will not understand. So, bless you. Better to keep quiet. That's what he said. So, this becomes one of the greatest silence of Buddha, that he actually wanted to share this with us. But then he hoped, unless you don't request for this, he's not going to give it. So that's why I told you from the beginning, emptiness is not everybody's cup of tea. So how serious are you? That's why. Otherwise you will always hear like, what is he going to talk about? There's no eye, there's no ears, what? Is he going crazy? So this is when the Nagarjuna said the student, the real student of who is capable to hear the teaching on emptiness, he listens to this teaching, there's a joy and the goosebumps, everything that he's like, this is it. But then Second one, the closer to that. Now this is the rightful person. The second person will like this girl. I cannot listen to that. That's too much. And it's real fear. It's not like I don't care. It's more like he cannot deal with it. Because he's trying to get something there. But in between, Nagarjuna didn't say anything. He's right or wrong. He didn't say anything. So my teacher would say, sometimes when we try to meditate on nothing, feeling is coming. So maybe we are not a right person, a wrong person, and we are completely left off somewhere. So to bring this, what is my teacher's technique to bring into this is how much are you tormented by the suffering, and especially the third one. Then of course you will really feel something. So this is something that. So now time is up. So we should go through time because sometimes long discussion and so many confusing things shared, and then people need to quite free time. So save your question for tomorrow, okay? I saw 2 people going up like that, or 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. Okay, hold your questions, and then maybe you can, if you want to keep the question here, so then otherwise maybe you will not get a chance, so you can put that on. Okay? Thank you very much.
Om Zaji Durgi Suji Medokram Rira Blinji Nide Gyambati Sangye Shindu Mide Bulwai Joge Namda Shinla Jepaishu Jesu Lame Kuse Raptenchi Nanga Jine Chokchu Gebata Losan Dembe Drunme Sasundi Dove Mense Tadune Yuji Idam Guru Ratnamanda Gandhiya Chaya. The final Lamrim dedication. For my 2 types of merit, vast the space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives in Rishi. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted boundless space, peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time, by even this graded path to enlightenment completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Gangi Rave Kove Shikanzi Pena Deva Malu Chumwene Jene Zewan Jenzen Yasori Jabez Madru Denyuju Kewa Kundu Yanda Lama Deme Jige Bela Longjuju Sada Longe Yunda Razone
Ida Tempatan, Yudo Sambo Deyan Deshente, Deha Kungi Jesu Daloji, Gewa Ida Kamjera Tu